They thought you would beg. They expected you to plead, to chase after them like a lost dog desperate for scraps. They played their little game, believing they held all the power, confident that you'd break, that you'd drown in desperation, trying to win back their attention. But imagine their shock when you do the unthinkable, when instead of running after them, you stop. Instead of pleading, you go silent. And suddenly, the silence they never prepared for becomes their worst nightmare. They thought they could toy with your emotions, like a puppet master pulling strings. But what happens when the puppet refuses to dance? The power they thought they had vanishes into thin air. That's when they start to feel it. The weight of their own choices pressing down on them like an unbearable burden. Now, they're the ones left restless, checking their phones for messages that never come, scrolling through old conversations, replaying the moments where they once had control. They try to decode your silence, searching for an explanation, but there isn't one, because you're no longer in the game. You've left the table. This isn't about revenge. It's not about mind games. It's something much stronger: self-mastery. The kind of mastery the Stoics spoke about, the kind that gives you true power, not over others, but over yourself. Stoicism teaches that strength isn't found in anger or retaliation, but in discipline, in the ability to remain calm while the world expects you to break. Think of it like a gambler who cheats at cards. He smirks, thinking he's won, stacking up his stolen chips. But the moment you stand up and walk away from the table, his victory turns hollow. At first, he enjoys the silence, believing he's won. Then, slowly, the realization creeps in. He has no one left to play against, no one left to trick, no one left to control. And suddenly, the thrill is gone. When you embrace Stoicism, you realize that silence is a weapon far stronger than words. The Stoic philosopher Seneca once said, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." That delay, the space between their expectation and your reaction, becomes the very thing that unsettles them. Because people expect patterns. They expect you to respond in anger, in pain, in desperation. But when you respond with nothing at all, it shakes them to their core. Now, you become the mystery. You become the enigma they can't figure out. And that unsettles them far more than any outburst ever could. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Your power isn't in proving them wrong. It's in proving yourself right. It's in stepping back and recognizing that you don't need to play their games to win. In fact, the only way to truly win is to refuse to play at all." They assumed you would always be there, always available, always predictable. They took you for granted, believing that no matter what, you'd always return. But when you remove yourself from their games, when you refuse to give them the reaction they crave, that's when they feel the sting of regret. Your silence, it echoes. Your absence, it haunts them. And that's where karma begins to play its game. Not in fiery vengeance, not in dramatic confrontations, but in the quiet realization they can't escape. The realization that they lost something real, something valuable, something they were too foolish to appreciate. You don't need revenge. You don't need to wish them pain, because the greatest consequence they will ever face is knowing that they played you and lost. Your power lies in your growth, in your ability to detach, in the quiet confidence of someone who knows their worth. The moment you walk away, the moment you focus on yourself, you shift the balance. They thought they were in control, but now it's you who holds the power, not through force, not through manipulation, but through the undeniable strength of someone who refuses to be played. Let karma do the rest. 1. When the hunter becomes the hunted. Once, you were the one reaching out, waiting for their replies, giving them your time, your energy, your heart. You placed them high, treating them like they were rare, like they were something special. And in return, they grew comfortable. They assumed you'd always be there, always waiting, always proving yourself. But the moment you stopped, the moment you chose yourself, everything shifted. The power they thought they had, gone. The control they once held, slipped right through their fingers. Now, they're the ones feeling the absence, the silence, the weight of what they lost. At first, they pretend, laughing, posting, acting as if nothing has changed. But deep inside, they know. The absence stings in ways they never expected. They took you for granted, assuming you'd always be an option. But options disappear when neglected. And nothing unsettles a person more than realizing they no longer have access to what they once dismissed. That's the moment they feel it. The emptiness, the regret, the slow realization that they were playing a game they never thought they could lose. People don't miss what chases them. They miss what knows when to walk away. It's human nature. The moment something is truly gone, it gains value. The same way a candle is never fully appreciated until its flame dies. The same way a song is just background noise until the music stops. Now they sit with a void they can't fill, that attention they once shrugged off. They crave it. That presence they once ignored, it haunts them. They replay old conversations, reread messages, looking for signs, trying to understand what changed, why you're no longer there. And the truth is, nothing changed except one thing. You finally realized your worth. This is where the Stoic mindset sets you apart. You don't wait for their reaction. You don't check your phone, hoping they reach out. You don't sit in the shadows, wondering if they miss you, because it doesn't matter. What matters is that you are no longer available. And that's what truly disturbs them. Not just your silence, but the fact that your silence isn't a strategy. It's your new reality. They'll test you. They'll throw bait, hoping you bite. A random, "How have you been?" as if nothing happened. A post meant to get your attention. Maybe they even try to make you jealous, just to see if you'll react. Because if you react, they win. It means you're still in their orbit, still affected, still within reach. But you don't fall for it, because a person who values themselves doesn't play games. They set the rules. If they want back in, it won't be on their terms. It will be on yours. If they took you for granted once, they will do it again. And you've already learned that lesson. This isn't about revenge. It's not about manipulation. It's about balance. You invested in them, gave them your energy, your loyalty, your presence. They treated it like it was nothing. And now they get to feel what nothing actually feels like. It's funny how people only understand value through loss. They only respect what they can no longer have. They only crave what they once neglected. And yet, by the time they finally recognize what they had, it's already gone. That's karma in its purest form. Not some dramatic punishment, not some cosmic revenge, but the simple weight of consequence. They toyed with something real, thinking they had all the time in the world. And now, as they sit in the silence they never saw coming, they finally understand what they had. But by the time they do, you've already moved forward. So who really won? The one who played games and lost, or the one who walked away and became stronger? Now, let me ask you something powerful. What is the most valuable thing you've learned from walking away? Drop it in the comments below with the affirmation, "I am enough." Let the world know that you choose yourself, your value, and your growth. If this message hit home, If you felt that shift, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another video that sharpens your mind and strengthens your spirit. Remember, your silence is louder than their games. Keep rising, keep growing, and keep walking in your power, because you are enough. 2. The quietest storm hits the hardest. When someone disrespects you, the natural instinct is to react, to argue, to explain, to seek closure that was never going to be given. But those who understand true power know that the strongest weapon isn't anger. It isn't revenge. It's silence. Silence unsettles people in a way words never could. It's an invisible force creeping into their mind like a shadow, filling the spaces where noise once covered the truth. They might pretend they don't care, act unbothered, post, laugh, and put on a show for the world. But deep down, the silence speaks louder than anything they could ever ignore. You were once predictable, always responding, always proving, always there. But now you've become a mystery, and nothing is more terrifying than the unknown. Epictetus once said, "The more you control your tongue, the more you control the situation." That's because words can be argued with, twisted, dismissed. But silence? Silence forces reflection. Silence leaves them alone with their own thoughts, and that is a battle they never prepared for. And that's when the questions begin to haunt them. Did I misjudge them? Why aren't they reacting? Why aren't they fighting for me? Doubt begins to creep in, and that doubt slowly turns into regret. They thought they were in control, playing a game they believed they were winning. But now, they realize the game is over, and the cruelest part, they're playing against themselves. Most people, when they feel rejected, react impulsively. They beg for explanations. They demand answers. They argue their worth, thinking that if they just find the right words, everything will change. But a Stoic mind knows better. True power lies in restraint. When you remove yourself, you leave them with nothing but their own thoughts. And that is where the suffering begins. Think of a fire that once burned bright, consuming everything in its path. But suddenly, without warning, the oxygen is taken away. No fuel, no air, just an eerie silence as the flames flicker, dim, and fade. That's what happens when you remove your energy. They don't realize how much they needed it until it's gone. And now, they're left suffocating in a silence they never expected. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." That is the essence of power. When someone disrespects you, when they take you for granted, the strongest response is no response at all. Because when you stop chasing, when you stop reacting, when you stop feeding their ego, you take away the one thing they depended on, your presence. And here's the hardest truth. You don't need to see their regret. You don't need to hear their apology. You don't need proof that your silence is working. The moment you step back, you've already won. You don't watch. You don't wait. You don't care if they regret it or not. You simply move forward, stronger, wiser, untouchable, because the person who masters silence masters themselves. And the quietest storm, it always hits the hardest. 3. Indifference, the ultimate revenge. Validation is like oxygen to those who thrive on attention, unseen but essential, unnoticed until it's suddenly taken away. The moment you withdraw it, when the constant supply of admiration and energy disappears, everything shifts. At first, they act unbothered, certain that you'll come back, just like before. But as the silence stretches, as the emptiness lingers, something unfamiliar begins to creep in. discomfort. They check their phone, hoping to see your name light up the screen. Nothing. They scroll through their social media, expecting a post, a cryptic quote, some sign of frustration, proof that you're still emotionally invested. But there's nothing, just silence. And that silence, once meaningless, now feels suffocating. They never expected this. They were so used to controlling the game, to knowing exactly how to provoke a response. They had the power, or at least they thought they did. But suddenly, that power is slipping, and for the first time they feel what it's like to be on the other side, to be the one waiting, the one hoping, the one feeling insignificant. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's the essence of true power, not in reacting, not in proving a point, but in the ability to remain unshaken. Indifference isn't cold-hearted revenge. It's the highest form of self-respect. They expected you to fight, to beg, to chase. And why wouldn't they? Most people do. Most people panic when faced with silence. They send long messages, searching for closure that was never meant to be given. They argue their worth, believing that words will somehow rewrite the past. They react out of fear, fear of being forgotten, fear of losing something they once cherished. But the one who truly understands their own value does none of this. A Stoic knows that respect is never something you beg for. If it isn't freely given, it was never worth having. Think of the ocean, unpredictable, powerful, seemingly endless. At times, waves crash violently against the shore, making their presence impossible to ignore. They are expected, even anticipated. But imagine if one day those waves simply stopped. No noise, no movement, just stillness. The silence would be deafening, the absence unsettling. That's the power of indifference. They braced themselves for a storm but found nothing but quiet. And that's far more terrifying than any outburst could ever be. Now, doubt begins to creep in. Did I misjudge them? Were they always this strong? How are they moving on so effortlessly? They start replaying past conversations, analyzing your every word, searching for clues that might explain why you've changed. And in doing so, they experience something they never thought they would: uncertainty. They thought they had control, that they could play with your emotions whenever it suited them. But now they are the ones overthinking, the ones feeling powerless. And the cruel irony, you're not even thinking about them. Desperation makes people act out. They might try to provoke you, throwing subtle jabs, posting pictures with someone new, flaunting their so-called happiness, hoping to get a reaction. But when those tactics fail, when your indifference remains unshaken, their confusion deepens. Because here's the truth: you're not silent out of spite. You're silent because you've genuinely moved beyond needing their validation. Sun Tzu said, "The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting." And that's exactly what indifference does. It wins without conflict. They thought they could toy with your emotions, manipulate your reactions, keep you in their orbit. But now, they are the ones spinning, searching for something that no longer exists. They crave what you once gave so freely, but they will never get it back. And that's when the realization sets in. The power they once had is gone. They took you for granted, assuming your presence was permanent. But now, in your absence, they see clearly. No one else puts them on that pedestal. They search for someone to chase them the way you once did, to validate them unconditionally. But real, rare energy like yours isn't easily replaced. That's the beauty of indifference, the silent, effortless shift of power. No shouting, no revenge, no forced lessons, just reality, raw and undeniable. The moment you stop investing where you aren't valued, everything changes. And by the time they understand what they lost, you've already walked away without looking back. Because nothing haunts a person more than realizing they lost something real, something irreplaceable, and nothing proves your strength more than the fact that you never needed them in the first place. 4. The rarity rule. What's always there goes unnoticed. Familiarity breeds indifference. When something is always within reach, it fades into the background, like air, unnoticed until it's gone. That's the nature of human desire. The less accessible something is, the more valuable it becomes. Relationships follow the same rule. The moment someone feels the weight of your absence, they begin to understand just how much they took for granted. Seneca warned against being too available, knowing that when something is always within arm's reach, it's often overlooked. Imagine a rare gemstone carelessly tossed into a drawer, gathering dust. It remains the same, valuable, unique. But when left in plain sight for too long, its significance is forgotten. Now, place that same gemstone behind a velvet rope, on display, admired but untouchable. Suddenly, everyone sees its worth. It's not the gem that changed, it's the way people perceive it. The same applies to your presence. When you're always there, always responding, always waiting, the message is clear. Your time is easy to take for granted. Many fear that stepping back will push someone away, but the opposite is true. If you're constantly available, texting first, reacting to every post, always answering immediately, it's easy for them to slip into complacency. They take the attention for granted, knowing you'll always be there, waiting. And when people know they can ignore you without consequence, they do. But the moment you stop chasing, the moment you stop filling the gaps, something strange happens. They feel it. At first, they pretend it doesn't matter. Maybe they claim they needed space. Maybe they even act relieved. But silence has a way of growing heavier over time. They check their phone and realize you haven't messaged. They scroll through their feed and notice your absence. They expect a reaction, a plea, a sign that you're still caught in their orbit. But it never comes. That's when the doubt sets in. Did I misjudge them? Were they always this strong? The shift is subtle but powerful. They expected resistance, arguments, explanations. Instead, they find nothing but stillness, and that is far more unsettling than any confrontation could ever be. A person who understands their worth doesn't beg to be seen. They don't demand attention. They simply exist, steadfast, focused, unmoved, like a mountain in the distance, admired for its quiet strength. And this is what makes the difference. If your absence goes unnoticed, then you've already been given your answer. If they don't care that you've stepped away, they were never truly invested to begin with. But if they start to feel that missing space, if they start searching for signs of you, then they're faced with a realization. You weren't just another presence in their life. You were something rare, and rare things aren't easily replaced. Some will say, "Isn't this cold? Isn't this manipulative?" Number. This isn't about playing games, it's about self-respect. You're not withholding affection, you're simply redirecting it to places where it's valued. As Seneca taught, our most valuable resource is time, and how we spend it determines our strength. Scarcity creates value. The more easily something is accessed, the less it's appreciated. And if people believe they can come and go as they please, you'll always be left feeling exhausted and unappreciated. Stepping back isn't a punishment, it's a shift in priorities. It allows others to recognize what they've lost, if they choose to. And if they don't, then you move forward, undistracted, at peace, and unshaken. Because your worth was never meant to be proven, it was meant to be recognized. 5. The mirror of self-worth. When you see it, so does the world. There was a time when their approval felt like oxygen, essential, life-giving, something you couldn't imagine thriving without. Every message, every glance, every fleeting sign of acknowledgement seemed to confirm your worth. You waited, you overanalyzed, you adjusted yourself to fit what you thought they wanted. In their recognition, you sought completion, mistaking their attention for validation, and in doing so, you unknowingly handed over your power. But then something shifted. Maybe it was exhaustion, tired of feeling like a puppet, strings pulled by someone else's whims. Maybe you stumbled across a truth from a Stoic thinker, something about self-mastery and inner strength. Or maybe you just woke up one day and saw it clearly. You were chasing something that was always running, and the harder you ran, the faster it fled. That was the moment of clarity. The realization that the only validation that truly matters is the one you give yourself. So you changed. You stopped looking outward for confirmation. The time and energy once wasted on seeking approval became fuel for self-improvement. Where you once spent hours crafting the perfect message, now you spent them at the gym, on your craft, in your own world. The approval you once begged for became irrelevant because you discovered something far more valuable, your own. At first it felt unfamiliar, maybe even unsettling. You had spent so much time anchoring your worth in someone else's perception that standing on your own felt like stepping onto unsteady ground. Would they notice your absence? Would they care? Would this push them away? The doubts crept in, whispering that self-respect might cost you their attention. But then, with each small victory, whether it was completing a goal, finding peace in your own company, or simply no longer flinching at their silence, you realized something profound. The more you respected yourself, the more the world began to reflect that respect back to you. People sensed the change. Those who once dismissed you started paying attention, not because you were asking for it, but because they felt the shift. You no longer reacted to every mood swing, every game, every breadcrumb of attention thrown your way. And that was unsettling to them. The same people who once took you for granted now felt the absence of your dependence like a sudden chill in the air, a drop in temperature they weren't prepared for. The irony: the moment you stopped seeking validation was the moment they started questioning theirs. They began to wonder, why aren't they reacting like before? Why don't they seem affected? Have I lost my grip on them? Suddenly, the roles reversed. They became the ones checking their phone, watching your movements, trying to decipher the meaning behind your silence. But by then, you had already moved into a new mindset, one where their recognition was nothing more than a passing shadow, irrelevant to the light you had found within yourself. This isn't about playing games or using reverse psychology. It's not about pretending to be detached just to elicit a reaction. That would still mean centering your worth around them. No, this is about something real, something unshakable. It's about recognizing that you don't have to prove your value. You just are valuable. Some might ask, isn't this selfish? Shouldn't I show that I care? But self-respect isn't selfish. It's the foundation of every meaningful connection. Loving yourself doesn't mean you can't love others. It simply means you refuse to love at the expense of your own dignity. Marcus Aurelius said, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live." And what is a life lived in constant pursuit of someone else's validation, if not a life half-lived? If someone drifts away because you stop chasing, let them. If someone loses interest because you placed boundaries, accept it, because those who truly value you will never require you to compromise your self-respect just to earn their presence. You used to believe that if you did everything right, if you proved your worth enough, they would finally see you. Now you understand something far more powerful. You don't need anyone to see your worth for it to exist. It has always been there, waiting. The only difference is that now you finally recognize it. And once you do, nothing, no fleeting approval, no temporary attention, can ever shake that foundation again. 6. When you rise, they fall behind. There was a time when their words, their attention, their validation shaped your entire world. You waited, hoping, checking your phone like it held the key to your existence. Their response, or the lack of it, was the invisible force controlling your emotions. But that version of you no longer exists. You've stepped into something greater, something unshakable. Now, the energy you once poured into chasing their approval is fueling something far more powerful, your own growth. And in that transformation, something remarkable happens. The same presence they took for granted has now become something they can no longer access. Your progress becomes a silent, undeniable reminder of everything they let slip away. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And you stopped reacting. You stopped centering your worth around them. You stopped waiting for permission to feel valuable. Instead of chasing, you invested in yourself, your body, your mind, your future. And with every step forward, you unknowingly delivered the most powerful response possible: indifference. Imagine a caterpillar. For so long it crawls unnoticed, unaware of its own potential. But once it embraces transformation, it breaks free, no longer bound to the same space, no longer moving at the same pace. It doesn't chase after those who never saw its beauty. It simply flies. And that's exactly what you're doing. There was a time when your self-worth was tied to their recognition. Now, your focus is different. Every workout builds more than strength. It builds discipline. Every challenge sharpens more than skill. It sharpens your mind. Your confidence is no longer rooted in their acknowledgement. It comes from something deeper, something unshakable. And here's the paradox. The moment you stopped needing them, they started noticing your absence. The shift is subtle but unmistakable. Where you were once readily available, now there's only space. Where you once sought validation, now there's only quiet confidence. And in that emptiness, something unexpected happens. They start wondering. They assumed you'd always be there, that your attention was a given, that no matter what, they could pull you back with a half-hearted message, a casual check-in. But now they're left with nothing but uncertainty. Did I misjudge them? Were they more valuable than I realized? The same attention they once ignored is now something they crave, but the game has changed, and they're no longer the ones in control. Some people fear that stepping away will push someone further away, but here's the truth. Scarcity creates value. What's always available is overlooked. What's rare is sought after. Your silence speaks louder than words, and your absence lingers longer than any argument ever could. The less accessible you become, the more undeniable your presence feels. Think of a well-tended fire. If you keep throwing wood into it constantly, it burns bright but is never truly appreciated. But if you let it die down, if you allow the warmth to fade, that's when people realize its true value. Your absence is that missing warmth, and the cold is what forces them to recognize what they took for granted. This transformation isn't about revenge. It's not about proving anything to them. It's about proving something to yourself. You've outgrown the need for external approval. You've stepped into a new phase where your value isn't determined by someone else's recognition. It's determined by you. Some may ask, but what if they never notice? What if they move on without a second thought? The answer is simple. It doesn't matter. The goal was never to make them regret it. The goal was to become someone so strong, so self-assured, that their absence is irrelevant. And if they do realize what they lost, that's just the consequence of underestimating someone who refused to stay the same. The best part? You're not just leveling up in one aspect, you're evolving entirely. You're becoming the person you were meant to be, untethered by the past, unstoppable in the present. And as you continue to rise, those who failed to see your worth are left behind, wondering how they ever let you go. 7. When you leave, the silence echoes. There was a time when your presence felt like a given, a steady backdrop to their everyday life. You were the one who always reached out first, who made sure they felt wanted, who reassured them that your time and attention were always at their disposal. They grew so at ease with your unwavering reliability that they took it for granted, much like one takes the rising sun for granted. But now, that warmth is gone. Your absence stretches across their days like a once vibrant house gone cold, its halls no longer echoing with the familiar melody of your voice. And in that sudden stillness, they begin to sense the sting of loneliness, where once there was comfort. At first, they might brush it off as a momentary phase, or convince themselves your silence holds no real weight. They may tell their friends, or even themselves, that your distancing doesn't truly affect them. Yet, as hours turn to days, that silence begins to press down like a heavy, invisible hand. The phone remains still. Their screen stays dark, absent of the messages they once counted on. Each time they unlock their phone, anticipating your name, they find only emptiness. And with that emptiness come the questions. Why aren't you reaching out? Have you simply moved on? Did they misunderstand who you truly are? These thoughts creep in slowly, chipping away at the certainty they once held. They might try to maintain the illusion of control, feigning indifference, posting on social media as if everything's the same, telling themselves and anyone who will listen that your absence doesn't mean a thing. But deep down, they feel the shift. Marcus Aurelius once observed, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. By choosing to withdraw, you're not executing some vengeful plan. You're exercising your power to decide where your energy goes. This quiet detachment is not a weapon aimed at them, but rather a step toward your own clarity and self-respect." Think of your previous presence as a constant soundtrack in their life, a tune played so consistently that it slipped into the background. When that melody suddenly stops, the silence is jarring. It's like a favorite song cut off mid-chorus, leaving an aching emptiness in its wake. Except here, the song was your attention, and the abrupt end carries an unmistakable significance. You no longer seek their validation. You no longer revolve around their whims. In an attempt to recapture what was lost, they might send a casual, "Hope you're okay," or attempt to provoke a reaction by flaunting their perceived independence. Perhaps they'll post something intended to stir your curiosity or spark a little jealousy. Yet, deep inside, they recognize the deeper truth. You are absent, not out of spite, but because you have outgrown the need for their constant reassurance. This realization can sting, forcing them to confront the fact that the power they once assumed was permanent is now gone. Consider your old role like a dependable grandfather clock, chiming steadily through the day. Over time, its sound blends into the fabric of life, so familiar that it's scarcely noticed. When the clock stops, however, its silence is more than just the absence of ticking. It's a stark reminder that nothing remains constant forever. They used to count on your steady presence, your predictable availability, and now that it's vanished, the resulting quiet demands their attention in a way your everyday presence never did. Their thoughts may spiral. Could I have prevented this? Did I misunderstand their value all along? Did I take someone irreplaceable and treat them as if they were disposable? These questions aren't mere fleeting curiosities. They challenge the confidence they once held. Your silence acts like a mirror, reflecting their oversight, their complacency, and revealing insecurities they managed to ignore when you were always there. Your departure isn't a calculated punishment. It's a natural progression for someone who realizes that their time, energy, and sense of self are too precious to be tethered to another's whims. In letting go, you affirm what the Stoics have long taught. Freedom lies in how you choose to direct your focus. By stepping back from a dynamic that no longer serves you, you maintain your dignity. Picture a stage where you were once the reliable supporting actor, always ready to deliver lines on cue. But now you've left the production, and the spotlight glares on an empty space. Everyone notices the gap where you once stood. And while they might scramble to fill it, the absence speaks louder than any scripted dialogue ever could. Naturally, you might wonder if this distance will push them further away, or if you're missing a chance to salvage what was there. But consider the nature of value. Scarcity heightens appreciation. When something is freely given at all times, it's easy to dismiss or overlook it. Only when it's gone do people realize what they had. If your absence pushes them away permanently, it merely confirms they were never truly invested. This line of thinking may lead to further doubt. Am I being cruel or manipulative by stepping back? Not at all. Instead, you are respecting your own boundaries. True cruelty lies in pretending you're content to be taken for granted when you're not. Manipulation would mean you're orchestrating your silence solely to spark a reaction, hoping to reel them back in. But your silence is different. It's the genuine result of choosing not to pour yourself into a place where you're not fully valued. Think of a well-kept garden. If you water the same patch of ground relentlessly and ignore the rest, eventually the unwatered sections wither. You've recognized that the relationship's soil was no longer nourishing you, so you've redirected that vital water, your time, your empathy, your energy, toward your own pursuits. In doing so, you're growing in ways they may never have anticipated, and that growth subtly highlights the disparity between who you were and who you've become. Over time, they may come to realize that your absence isn't empty space at all. It's a reflection of your newfound wholeness. When you were around, they had the power to determine when you felt seen and when you felt invisible. Now, you've reclaimed that power by simply existing on your own terms. In the end, your decision to walk away resonates with a truth as old as time. What is too easily obtained is often undervalued. By removing your constant presence, you've allowed them a chance to discover what they overlooked. If they come to appreciate it, that's their journey. If they don't, it doesn't diminish the worth you've discovered in yourself. You have shown that sometimes the absence of something once taken for granted speaks volumes, and those who listen closely will hear, in the echo of your silence, the profound message you never needed words to convey.